What Democrats want to do is like try to get some bills through Congress. And what Republicans want to do is like go on podcasts. And what happens is when the Democrats are in power and Republicans are out of it, they're each suited to their roles. When it flips, what you have is Democrats struggling to get attention and Republicans having a hard time governing and instead going to war against their own government.
Welcome to Salon Talks. I'm Dean Obeidallah. Today with us, Chris Hayes, host of the Emmy Award-winning show All In with Chris Hayes on MSNBC, author of numerous New York Times bestsellers, and your new one, number one, The Sirens Call. Congratulations, number one with a bullet. This is a great book, my friend. It is well-researched. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
I'm smarter now from reading it. I don't say that too often about other people's books.
That is the best thing an author can hear. Like the thing when you write a book is A, you want people to read it.
Right.
Which is not nothing. Like as I document in the book, we're all distracted. And B, if people find it useful, or like my favorite thing is when people read a book, something that you've written and they feel like it generates their own thoughts.
Yeah.
You know, like, I started having these thoughts about things. That's the sort of the sweet spot.
It's like when you read it and you go talk to someone, like my fiance, I'm like, did you hear about this study where the gorilla comes out? And she goes, I know that study. I'm like, I didn't know that study. Where like, because you talk about it in the book, the focus is so intense on counting something and you miss the person coming out in a gorilla suit.
Yep.
And then it rang a bell. I'm like, oh yeah, I did know that. And it's really helpful. But what I love, you write about attention is the substance of life. I'm needy, so I know this, right? Like I sincerely, I'm a needy. I know I talk about being the needy MBA person on my show and I host my own show.
Yeah.
But
it's good to be self-aware.
I get it.
No, I am too.
But what I got from your book is I'm not alone.
Yeah.
Like on some level, attention is like oxygen. And then the idea, you talk about people going to solitary confinement as a form of punishment. Yeah. So is attention like oxygen? Do we need this to survive?
Yes. I mean, social attention, that specific form of attention. You know, there's one of the things I try to do in the book is sort of map out these dimensions and distinctions. But attention on us, which is one really important form of social attention, is so elemental to human life that it is the necessary precondition to survive. Mm-hmm. Like a newborn infant is totally helpless and it dies unless it is attended to. So from the moment we come into the world, our survival depends on attention from others. And then when you investigate and you read about people that have been exposed to prolonged periods of isolation, it's a form of torture, it's a form of madness, and that's because that social attention from other people is like the lifeblood of human existence.
Yeah, I mean, in your book you have the voluntary attention, involuntary attention, but the social attention is the one that really grabbed me. I'm like, okay, I get this very deeply. It is part of our need as society. You also talk about the idea of alienation. You write, you can't understand the attention age without grappling with the experience of alienation. And that alienation is what it feels like to be alive now, you write. And that line really jumped at me. Why do you feel that way?
Yeah, alienation is one of those concepts that I've always been a little suspicious of because it could be so fuzzy and all-encompassing. It's like what you're talking about. But the specific thing that I'm talking about here is a sense that a thing that should be inside you is outside of you. A thing that you should have control over and be internal to you has been taken from you and it is now alien to you. And I think we feel that way about our own attention, about our own minds. Like this feeling of constantly being compelled to pay attention to something, maybe against our will, maybe eliciting some part of our will that we feel icky about. Right. And then that attention being outside of us and not something that properly we control. It's that feeling of alienation, this kind of like mental car sickness that we all walk around with, that kind of stuck in traffic feeling, but in your mind, that I think is really become a kind of the mood of the times, like the background noise.
Yeah, I see examples of real alienation. I've seen couples in New York both walking next to each other on their phone, separately.
Oh yeah,
and they're sharing the same space, but they're literally in different worlds.
That's the other. I mean, that's the other aspect of that alienation is we can be alienated from our own attention and then alienated from each other through technologies that are defined with increasing sophistication and the use of machine learning, running experiments over 1 billion users to find the particular individual thing we will want to spend time with that might be different than the spouse sitting next to us on the couch.
It's, you also go through, and I think really well, about through history, every new invention has caused moral panic. Yeah. The idea from radio, TV, the Walkman. iPhone. I went to Museum of Modern Art has an exhibit about the earliest days of Impressionism, and you read the articles like it's the devil's work.
Yes,
It's going to destroy society. I'm like,
those are really
wild.
wild. The reviews of the Armory show when it comes to New York and the Impressionism period.
Right, I'm like, what is going on? And I'm like, we're no different. So how do you not end up just being
one of those?
Those people are like, it's crazy, social media, and then in a few years, it's like, okay, we're okay with that, but now this is really the
bad my favorite example of that is a quote I have from I think the 1890s where someone's writing about the scourge of magazines.
Yes.
And the thing he says, like nowadays, after dinner by the fire, a whole family is sitting, each looking at their own magazine and not paying attention to each other. It's like so perfect. So I think there's two answers to that. One is that if you go back, you can look at sort of these resistance to new technologies as moral panic, but also as capturing something true. I mean, people weren't wrong to recognize that TV was a revolutionary technology that was going to totally alter how politics was conducted, how commerce was conducted, and how people lived their lives in their domestic sphere. All of that was true, right? So first of all, we're dealing with a technology on the order of, at the very least, TV, which is to say it's going to have seismic implications. But number two, I do think there's a bunch of things that differentiate this technology. Its ubiquity, which is totally distinct. You carry it around, you have this portal to it. Its sophistication in terms of the scale at which it's operating over 1 billion users. There's never been a medium that operates over 1 billion users. And then crucially, this social aspect where it is able to talk to you individually in a way that no technological media form has ever been able to do. The closest you could get was to look into the camera and try to like sell to a generic housewife or Uncle Sam pointing at the poster. But this can actually talk to Dean Obeidallah. Like this technology can have people tag and mention you. It can weaponize that need for social attention at scale in a way nothing else ever has before.
In your book, and again, there are things in your book that have come up in real life because of it. After I think of it, like you talk about how we're wired if you hear your name, right? So I noticed a few replies on Blue Sky, where I live more now, was like, it's like Dean, whatever, and I have to read that. I'm like, there's my name. And then it's some insult, or it's something real, like they want to engage. And those get me more than ones that don't.
Yeah.
And the same thing with, you talk about like people on the streets of New York trying to sell you something, usually a donation to a very worthwhile charity or a cause. But you did that when you were younger, and it's the random shot. But if you knew about this person the same way technology knows about us, that sales pitch is so much more effective.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, every salesman knows this, right? The huge part of sales is sort of centering in on the individual nature of the person you're pitching to. And that's what this technology enables people to do at scale.
It is remarkable. What about, so look, there are valid concerns about the technology we have today. But what about AI and where we're going? And the fact that the pushback against any kind of regulation that by some and others want to do some kind of common sense regulations. But this seems to be, I love new technology. I embrace it all the time.
Me too.
Like, this is great. But I'm like, this AI thing is either going to be how we all die or something really helpful. I'm not really sure yet.
I mean, I think, God, I have a bunch of complicated thoughts, and I still feel like I'm in the beginning of a learning curve on it. I mean, there's a Sam Altman quote where he talks about the machine learning that's employed on algorithmic social media as being the very first alignment problem of AI. Meaning, it's useful to understand that algorithmic social media is really the first mass consumer product driven by large language models. I mean, it is machine learning at scale, right? It is learning what people like and don't like, and learning in real time and getting more and more sophisticated. The fact that that can produce a set of incentives that are misaligned with like what we want from humans, or produces a lot of like swastika content or whatever it is, right? That's a big problem that portends something profound about AI in the future. In terms of the specifics of AI, I mean, one of the things that's crazy is, think about the fact that, okay, now social media has this thing where they can get Dean's attention on Blue Sky, right? But there's a person connected to that. Now imagine a world in which AI can do that.
Right.
And imagine a world in which there is no regulatory demand that when you're talking to a computer or a bot and a human. Like, that to me is the most obvious point. You can start to scale this sort of social trend. Imagine people friending you 6 months before an election. And they're talking to you and you have shared interests, and then they start to sort of like say things about the election, and they're kind of trying to drive you towards a certain point of view. And then it turns out, oh, that's just an AI bot that was deployed at scale. Like, there are serious ethical questions here.
I sense a sequel to
Yeah,
this. You got to write that book. I mean, I'm intrigued already. So let's talk about politics for a little bit here. You talk about Donald Trump. I think we all get it. Has harnessed very well the attention industry that we live in. Is it him? Is it he works the system well?
Yeah.
Is it the system going, okay, we have this person and we can use this person to do what we need to do, which is to monetize? Like, what is it?
I think it's sometimes that a man meets his moment. And in this case, it's sort of a dystopian version of this, where a person whose desire for attention is so defining and pathological that it's genuine and authentic in a way that's unfakeable. Like, he is not an authentic person insofar as he lies all the time.
Sure.
But the thing about him that is, it's his desire for that attention is so deep. It's coming from such a deep place. He needs it so pathologically. And it turns out he entered politics at the moment of the attention age when attention is the most valuable resource. And from this sort of feral instinct backed into this realization. All attention is good attention, even negative attention. The point is to dominate attentional space. And if you look at his first few weeks in office, I mean, he comes out every day behind the Resolute desk. I've never seen it before. Every day, 4 o'clock, Resolute desk, Oval Office, and it could be the most like insane, surreal thing you've ever seen, like Elon Musk twitching with his 4-year-old in front of him. But you're watching. Like, that's the point. And that is, I think, the key, the central insight that has helped him.
Now, you know, you've talked about, and I think you posted as well online, about Democrats losing the war of attention. We all get that. I think everyone watches it. Is it them? I have members of Congress on my radio show. We talk about it. They get slightly defensive when I go, you guys are not fighting hard back. And they'll list what they're doing. I'm like, well, it's funny, didn't make press coverage.
Well, that's the thing. The fight, the sort of, are you fighting back or are you getting attention might not be the same thing.
Right, that's what they are not getting.
Right.
This disconnect. They're like, and also with the weapons they're listening to me are the same traditional ones from the past. When we're in a new world right now, you're back with Donald Trump. You got to think of creative, untraditional ways to get press.
You got to
can't go on a podium in the basement of the Senate and hope everyone's going to cover this.
I mean, I thought when they went outside USAID.
Yes.
I thought that
Treasury.
worked.
Yeah, and
when
Treasury,
they're outside USAID. They had I don't know if they mic set up or maybe even just a megaphone. There was protesters there. Like, that was the first time where I was like, okay, like there's something happening here that's new, that's different, where you're trying to break through. But a huge part of it is just like this kind of default institutionalism, this kind of hidebound risk aversion that I think has become a real cultural problem in the Democratic Party. This kind of stasis, you know, and not wanting to try new things and being scared of new things. And I think also a real problem, which I think they've found themselves in for perfectly good reasons, is they really are more comfortable governing than being powerless in opposition. And Republicans are the other way around. Like, what Democrats want to do is like try to get some bills through Congress. And what Republicans want to do is like go on podcasts. And what happens is when the Democrats are in power and Republicans are out of it, they're each suited to their roles. When it flips, what you have is Democrats struggling to get attention and Republicans having a hard time governing and instead going to war against their own government.
That's a great way of putting it. I think also one of the things for the Democratic base is that the Democratic leadership for about a year, if not more, but certainly during the campaign, Donald Trump's a fascist. He's going to take away our freedoms, our democracy, everything, right? After he wins, they're like, let's find common ground. We're like, what? You just told us.
I think that was a pretty rough message twist.
But here's the thing. I believe that they were correct about describing Donald Trump accurately before the election.
I don't think their worst fears have been disproven by his actions in the first 3 weeks.
I don't get this strategy where someone sat in a room and go, okay, let's work with him. Where does this work?
Well, let me defend them this way. I do think, here's the logic, and I don't think it's ludicrous. We believe this is true, that he is a threat to democracy.
Right.
We made this argument consistently and forthrightly to the American people, and they were like, I don't care. So then I think what they said is, look, if people don't care about that argument, if that's not breaking through to people, we shouldn't keep trying it. We should try something new. So what we're going to try is we'll work with him on areas we agree, but what about the price of eggs? Now, again, that has a certain logic to it. In fact, in the latest polling, even a very good poll for him that came from CBS, where he had positive approval, 77% of people said he wasn't doing enough about prices.
Right.
Like, you had inflation come in hot this week. Like, there's a bunch of, so it's not crazy, but there's something just a little narratively incoherent about, like, as he like lays waste to the government and does all this stuff to be like, well, what about the price of eggs? Like, okay, yes, but
I see your point, and I agree that actually is something that transcends all the rhetoric. When someone's paying too much and they can't afford things, then it makes them maybe more, their appetite increases for hearing other stuff. Perhaps that's what you have to hope.
Yeah, and I think politics is about figuring out effective means of public communication, particularly when you're in the minority, when they literally have no power. I mean, no power to set an agenda, right? They have to react to the agenda. So one of the things you have to do is just try different messages, try to do different things. And one of the things I think you can do is say, look, he has given the keys of the government over to a billionaire to enrich themselves, to screw over working people, to push through big tax cuts, and what is happening to your costs? There's a way to sort of unify those messages, and some Democrats are doing a good job. I think it's hit and miss.
That's what I think, and I think there are individual ones who are praised as fighters and who are understanding the medium. It's not just the message, it's the medium now. You got to figure out which medium you're going to go to reach people.
And it's a little generational too.
True.
I mean,
but that's the attention, going back to your book, the idea of getting people's attention. There's certain people you're going to reach at a podcast. There's certain people you're going to reach on cable news or writing a Substack or writing an op-ed for the New York Times. And I think that's where there's no unified
But
approach.
you also have to trust, one of the things I think is really important is there's this entire industrial complex around Democratic politicians of PR people and comms people and everything has to be vetted and everything because blah, blah, blah. AOC just goes on Instagram and she just talks to people. And maybe she's going to say some things that are going to be taken out of context and she's going to get killed in the New York Post for it. And that does happen for sure. But you know what? She is trying her level best to authentically communicate without these filters. And I think and there's a lot to learn from that, which is you just go talk to people. On any platform you can find, go talk to people.
I could not agree more. And the authenticity can't be fake. So certain people are going to fit well and certain others. But look, your book's about attention. And you've been on TV now for more than a decade hosting your show. You talk about in your early years, the struggle, and then these are the road. I don't know, the great years, the good years, there's always good and bad. But what have you learned about getting attention over this year? How has it changed for you in terms of trying to get the viewership attention?
Well, I mean, one is just the constant change of the universe we live in. When I started doing this show, I remember we had the showrunner for House of Cards, Bo Willimon, on the show. And we had him on the show as 2013 or 14 because the big thing was Netflix has a show now. That was the reason we booked him. I mean, it was a political drama.
Right.
But the big story here was whoa, Netflix making content. So the radical transformation, TikTok didn't exist, none of that. All of that's happened in the last 10 or 12 years where in every moment, everyone who's doing something like what you and I are doing is competing with every other piece of content ever made in human history. That is the library at which, and I see it with my kids sometimes, they'll discover, because they'll be rooting around on Disney, a now canceled sitcom from 2002 that they're watching all the time. They watch every episode of. It's Dog with a Blog. That's a real show. There's a show called Dog with a Blog about a dog with a blog. Didn't last very long. My daughter loves it. And so the point of that is the competition is incredibly fierce. More intense than it's ever been. I've learned that. B, people, it's hard to move people off the platforms they're on. So you have, that's the other thing. It's I have a podcast that comes out weekly. We reach a bunch of people that don't watch my TV show. A lot of people watch my TV show and don't listen to the podcast.
Right.
I hope there's a lot of people that read this book who don't do either. There are, and I'm on Blue Sky and I'm on X and I'm on Threads. And part of the reason that I'm on all these different places is different people, different generations, different demographics get information different ways. So you kind of have to be in all these different places.
So, I mean, if there were things and you address in the book that you could talk about anything you want on your show, but if there were things you couldn't talk about on your show, could you talk about them? Would you choose to talk about them in a book? And is there ever the push and pull between what the big world of corporate media is versus saying you're writing a Substack or writing a
No, I mean, to
article?
me, it's less I think I had this conception when I was younger of corporate media won't let you say X or Y. And I've really not had that experience. When people talk about advertisers all the time, no one knows my advertisers less than me. I talk to viewers who will mention my advertiser all the time. I'm I've never seen an ad for my own show. I have no idea who my advertisers are. No one, in fact, you know much better than I, because you actually watch it from the outside. I sit there in the studio 4 minutes. So that part of it is just not a factor. What is a factor is format. That's the big factor. what can you do in an 8-minute cable news block versus what can you do in a 45-minute podcast versus what can you do in a 300-page book versus what you can do in an essay, what you can do in a tweet or a Blue Sky post. Like, that's where I think you hit limitations in format. You know, so it's like there are certain topics. Like I did this podcast with this guy David Roberts, who's a great writer on the green economy, and we talked about the electrical grid for like 50 minutes, 55 minutes, and it was fascinating. You can't really do that on a cable news show. You know what I mean? Like there's too much detail to fill up. So one thing that's great is with these different formats, I do think like, and I write about this in the book, like even at the same time we have this like lowest common denominator Sirens Call of the kind of casinoification of content, the algorithmic drive to short video. Next to that, we have these boundless human appetites for all sorts of different things. People listen to 4-hour podcasts. People get really into like shows about history or astrophysics, you know? So like people are interested in different stuff, and a more diverse landscape allows you to meet those different needs in different places and create like small scale but sustainable outlets. But the question is like which of those two impulses is ascendant?
And it's interesting, just the different shows too. I remember you going on Up with Chris Hayes.
Yeah.
Where you had the Danish.
Yeah.
And we would talk about things.
We talk for anything.
Right. And we would talk. I think probably the first time I ever mentioned I was Palestinian on any TV show was on your show because it came up. And it was like, oh, really? But again, Chris, congratulations on the book, The Sirens Call. It's #1. It's a great read.
Thanks,
You're
man.
going to learn a lot, my friend. And thanks for tuning to Salon Talks. I'm Dean Obeidallah.
Thank you for watching Salon Talks. If you had a good time, why not subscribe right over here so you can get more conversations with your favorite artists, actors, directors, writers, comedians, musicians, politicians, everybody you love, and I love too. And while you're here, why not watch another video right now?